Hi, I'm Alexis, and welcome back to our third episode of A Little Bit of Light. Today, we are with Mr. Smith, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Smith for joining us here today for our topic. For those who don't know, our topic will be about managing our stress and choosing what to do after high school or just life in general. So, one of my first questions to start off the topic would be, Mr. Smith, what advice would you give to the students at our school planning for a career after high school?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I have, I didn't know when I was in high school, and I wish somebody would have told me this, but it really comes down to the fact that you cannot determine right now where your life is going to take you. And I think the more stress that as a student you put on yourself to lay out all of your next steps, I think you try and force life to fit a certain mold, and life's not going to fit that mold, whether it's messy or not. There is a path that will happen, and I think a lot of being okay with that and kind of taking a less stressful approach to it really comes down to preparing yourself as best you can, but then allowing life to guide you. Make some plans and obviously have goals. Those things are obviously important, but really being open to changes, being open to what life throws at you, I think is probably the biggest piece of advice that I have. When I was going through school and kind of heading toward college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that teaching was an idea. And as it turns out, I finished student teaching and moved across the country to Las Vegas and started teaching here and started teaching things I wasn't even prepared to teach. So if I would have, resisted against that, I guess I wouldn't be where I am. And it just was a lot easier to deal with the stress that came along with it because I didn't have all these preconceived ideas of what my life was going to be.
That's very helpful, no, because I feel like as students, it's easy to get stressed. And also wanted to ask, since we are a tech school, and in order to get into our school, you have to pick a certain program. So within that program, there may be students out there who realize, maybe they don't want to do culinary after their career. So what would you say to those kids who are like stressing over that?
Well, I think one of the cool things about our school is that your program area, it doesn't matter which one you're in. Every single one of our program areas teaches you so many skills that are applicable across careers and across strands of careers, that you have so many transferable skills at your disposal that you're already leaps and bounds ahead of most of the people going into really any career. And if you do decide to go against your program area, I heard the mentality a lot of that it's wasted time. And it's definitely not wasted time. All of the time you spent at Northwest, and this is core classes, program area classes, electives, everything, every single thing you've done in like your K-12 educational career has value. And I don't think that changing what you want to do diminishes that value. It just changes how you use the skills that you have. So I think that when you look at it, it's almost more of an exciting opportunity because then you get to figure out, what do I know that I didn't realize I already know, right? Like we have this idea, we get so caught up, and our students get caught up in their program area that they forget that what they're learning is life skills. They're learning, workplace skills, and they're skills that are transferable to anything. So I think having gone here is such an advantage regardless of your program area, that I think it's just another tool in your arsenal. It's not necessarily a drawback if you go against where your program area took you. And
Yeah,
nope.
but
I was just going to add that I was just going to add that I think sometimes having gone in a specific direction better prepares you to go in a different direction, because if you've explored one area, knowing what's not for you is just as valuable as knowing what is for you. So
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Especially, like being in that moment, it can be like, oh, when is this knowledge ever gonna be thrown at me again? But it's like no knowledge is ever wasted. I feel like once you learn something, you can never like take a step back because like what you said, if you realize this is not for me, like maybe mechanical technology isn't for you, then that outs another career that you don't want to do, and there opens a whole nother door within that. So, and I also want to ask you, since after high school, um, for those of the people who don't think that college is for them, like they want to pursue like their dreams. I heard people who want to be like in the music industry, which I think is so dope. So what would you say to those kids who like feel like they wasted, I guess, their not necessarily time at like at a school like ours, but what would you say to them?
I think I think a lot of like when you're deciding what to do after college, especially if you want to have a career that is somewhat dependent on a lot of different variables, not necessarily has a specific path kind of laid out. I think when you want to approach some of those careers, it can be really daunting to do that. And I know there's a lot of societal pressure, kind of both ways, either pick that or pick this, and there is no in between. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think what you want to try to avoid more than anything else is avoid closing doors. I think when you look at the idea of going to college, if you don't want to go to college right away and you want to pursue a dream, that's fine, but don't take it with the approach of the fact that you're never going to go to college. My 63-year-old mother just got her general studies degree from a community college and is using that in her work with the tumor registry in her career. And it's something that she decided after being out of school for 40 years that it was something she wanted to go back and do. So I think there's a lot of pressure, and I know that leads to a lot of stress. But I think an important thing to remember is that you're never too late to make a change, and all of these things, right? Age is a number. I think it's important to move forward. I think is the biggest thing. Take steps to continue to move toward your goals, even if a career goal might not be working out. Are you still working towards something like financial stability? Or are you still taking some classes so that you can further your work in that career path? So I think as long as you're doing those things, I think it's less about what you're doing specifically and more about the fact that you're being honest with kind of your desires and your hopes and what you hope to accomplish. And there's really no rules. I mean, there's the way a lot of people do things, and then there's all these other ways too that are equally as awesome.
Well, that almost left me speechless. Um, like I was, college will always, I guess, be there. You know, life is always constantly going. And you'll always have like those choices. So I think we're gonna go to break. Stay tuned for our next topic. welcome back after our short break. Now, for those of you seniors who are graduating pretty soon, this is just for you. So, Mr. Smith, what advice would you give to those seniors who don't know what step to take after high school if they don't know necessarily what they want to do?
All right, so I think my big like earth-shattering advice for like the day after you graduate is take a deep breath. Right, just take a deep breath and understand first of all what you've accomplished. I think that there's so much pressure put on what students are doing after school that they forget to look back and realize what they just did. And I think that when you recognize and you step back and you look at what you just accomplished as your whole K-12 experience as like this body of work, it's incredible what you've already done with your life. Right? Like that part can never be taken away from you. Like it's done now. And you get to look back on it and just be satisfied with it. And I think that in and of itself brings a little bit of peace, right? Because we know that at that point, there's something that you can hang your hat on. There's no longer this feeling of like emptiness and what am I going to do and I'm so lost. No, you've already taken a step down the road. And I think that's the biggest thing to remember is that you're not starting from nowhere. You're starting from a place where a lot of people don't get to. You're starting with knowledge that a lot of people don't get to start with. If you don't stick out this thing that's high school, then you end up in a place where life gets a lot harder. But if you make it through and you graduate, regardless of what diploma type or what program area or where you are in class rankings, you've accomplished something that now nobody can take away. And I think the next step after that is to make some sort of a commitment. Make some sort of a commitment for yourself. If that commitment is to go to a 4-year university out of state and go and live your life and do your thing, then do it. If your step is to go to a university in town, UNLV or community college, CSN, right? It's a step, it's a commitment. If your commitment is to get a job and get an apartment and get started financially, then that's a step. I think where people really get into trouble is being too afraid to take the first step. Because if you never start, then how can you go anywhere? But if you look at the first step as being not permanent, right? Everything is temporary. Every job you take is temporary. Every university you attend is temporary. Every place you live is temporary. All of it's temporary. Every single thing can be changed. And I think not being afraid to make first of all, the commitment to start in a direction, and then not being afraid to make a change when you feel that one is needed. I think that's where you run into trouble, when you have that fear of those decisions. But if you can commit to one thing, and it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter if it's a job or if it's continuing your education or if it's some sort of like trade school or some sort of program somewhere, even online programs that continue in your career, all of those things are a step, right? All of those things are a step. And I think the only real mistake you can make is not taking a step somewhere. There's so much pressure on what that step should be, but that step is so individual, it's so personal that it frustrates me sometimes when there's that pressure, because it really is something that's just, it's meant to be personal. It's your life, it's your journey. And I think when you try and shoehorn that into the mold that somebody else made for you, it's stressful. You can't live up to somebody else's expectations. You can only live up to your own. So that's where my thought process is anyway.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. Always take the chances. It's better to take a chance and knowing that it's not for you than regret not taking the chance. So
Absolutely.
I want to follow up with your response of how you talked about fear and not living up to others' expectations. Personally, for me, my culture and my cousins often struggle this as well. The I guess the stereotype of I'm Filipino, so like being a nurse or being something in the medical field can often put a lot of pressure on those Filipino students. So what would you say? Well, not to only Filipinos, but to other cultures who have a stereotype and whose parents are pushing them to go to the medical field or go to, something else. So what would you say to those students who fear of speaking up for what they actually want to do to their parents?
Sure. Well, and this is a real tough one, right? This is a really tough one. Mine was somewhat cultural too, in terms of growing up in rural northern Michigan. My parents had a lot of expectations for my life that I have not fulfilled. And at some point, you recognize, and the earlier you can recognize this, the better, that your life needs to be your own. One of, and I know it's a little somewhat off topic, it's not necessarily career related, but like one of my decisions, my life decisions with my wife and I, was to not have kids. And in my family, I have a huge family, so that's very much looked down upon. But it took me a long time to recognize that my life was mine, and I needed to make decisions based on what was best for me. And I know that there are oftentimes a lot of those situations that are a lot more complicated than just making a decision one way or another. But I think the more you recognize that you are going to be the one that has to live your life, and you're going to be the one that day in and day out has to be happy with what you set up for yourself, I think you owe it to yourself to live the life that you want to live. I think there's obviously a level of respect in terms of family and culture that is, it's important that that's maintained. I think that snubbing all of that is not the right answer either. But I think that there's a lot of merit to taking a stand in your life for what you want to do with your life. And I think my parents have, been a lot happier than I expected them to with what I accomplished by, graduating college and moving across the country. And they don't get to see me all the time, and all of those things. They were very, very hard at the beginning. It was a hard discussion to have. There was animosity there, but we eventually worked through it, and you start to figure out, how those. Okay, so there's kind of looking at something I talk about in my personal leadership class is locus of control. So one of the ideas that we talk about is this idea of locus of control. And what it means is that there are two groups of things in your life. You have the things that are within your locus of control, and there are things that are outside of your locus of control. The things that are inside are the things that you can actually have an effect on, right? Those are the things that you can actually control. And really, you can't even really control most of those. It's really how you control how you react to things, right? Then there's this group of things that are totally outside of your control. And that group is where we start getting into family expectations, teacher expectations, administration expectations, friendships, relationships. You can't control how other people feel about you or the decisions that you make. What you can control is how you react to that and how you internalize that. So it's really up to you. Like, there's so much of your life that's up to you that it's a little daunting to think about, but it's liberating to think about at the same time, that you have that control to decide how those things impact your life. And I think when you really wrap your head around the fact that your life is your own, and that there are certain things in your life that you can't fix, when you can eliminate that stress from your life, you get down to a much more manageable level of stuff. And then you just, on the whole, it's all easier to deal with.
Wow. I think this is just such a great topic to talk about. Not just, for the seniors who we touched on, but for, everyone, whoever comes across this live. It's very easy to kind of feed into what people want from you, especially if, you're like a person pleaser or something like that. You have to realize that you kind of have to, realizing that your life is yours, and you should be brave enough to take a step forward. And a quote I always keep with me every day is, um, anything is possible if you're brave enough to do it your own way. I think that's something very important to know, because, like you said, like, there, like your locus of control, like there's stuff you can control and there's stuff you can't control. And I always say, if you want to do something that other people don't necessarily agree with, prove them wrong.
Yep.
Feed, prove them wrong. Like if you're feeding, that's a good energy of proving someone wrong. That means you're capable of doing it, and they were bad for doubting you and for feeding you into the expectation. So thank you,
Well,
Mrs. Smith, for the.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
one more thing. I think you also get to a point where not only do you start doing it for yourself, but you also become an example to other people. And then you get to a place where you're starting a ripple effect of not just taking a stand for your own life, but helping everybody else around you do the same.
that's also a great thing to know. Like if you stand up for yourself, someone else who might look up to you, you can help them stand up for themselves as well. So thank you, Mr. Smith, for joining us here today. I It was a very very informational topic, not just for me, but for people who are watching this. So, and for those of you who have questions for us, go to our HMG Hub page, go to A Little Bit of Light, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there will be a form there. Or go to our Instagram page at hawkmediagroup.news. It's always there, and the link in our bio. And don't forget, at the end of the day, there will always be a little bit of light. See you guys next time.